Well, former President Trump was all set to testify to the New York State Attorney General today, but he instead used his right to the Fifth Amendment to avoid testifying. Now, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution establishes a number of rights related to legal proceedings, including the one that no one shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. Now, this is not a criminal case. This is separate from the raid. So let's put that aside for a second, because this is a civil fraud case, but it has come to, the Fifth Amendment does apply to cases like this too now. It is likely that the raid did throw a wrench in the wheel of this Attorney General case. The Attorney General case is investigating whether the Trumps inflated the values of properties to get loans. The Attorney General's office has fought hard to force Trump and his three children, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, to testify, and a judge then ordered them to comply. They were actually scheduled to do this in mid-July, but you may recall Ivana Trump died unexpectedly, and so the deposition was moved. It did seem at the time that all three were willing to go through with the deposition, but then again, like I said, this unexpected death, right? Eric Trump was deposed in 2020, and he pleaded the Fifth Amendment over 500 times in that deposition, according to court filings. Ivanka and Don Jr.'s depositions also went ahead as scheduled, but we don't know if or how many times they pleaded the Fifth, because you can use it on a question-by-question basis. That's not what President Trump did. He pleaded it entirely, meaning no part of the deposition took place. The former president may very well have been prepared to do this deposition, if not for the raid on his home by the FBI, which would spook anybody, of course, right? So the former president released a statement on his Truth Social. He said, "I once asked, if you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? Now I know the answer to that question. The United States Constitution exists for this purpose, and I will utilize it to the fullest extent to defend myself against this malicious attack." Now this, I just want to stop for a second before we continue. Also, can you clean my glasses to have this? Because I can't see what I'm reading.
That's what I do. She's I buy these microfiber cloths, and she doesn't know how to use them.
All I see is my own fingerprint from putting it on.
She literally has a wool blanket that she's sitting with. That will not clean glasses.
No, it will just, but you have those microfibers over there.
Yes, I will clean it.
One thing that struck me about this is that it is a little bit contrite, and that is not something we're used to out of President Trump. He never, when he's asked about things he said in the past, like, but you said this, or you said you wouldn't do this, he usually deflects or gets grumpy, but he's actually addressing something that he has said before. And that surprised me. Did the tone hit you in any which way, Kim?
I mean, I in listening to the statement, reading the whole thing, it didn't really strike me. It made me understand really his thinking, and I think he is scared. I mean, it kind of almost came across that way, like he's genuinely feeling now the power of this sort of what I think many of us look at and say, this does look like a political witch hunt. I mean, they keep going after him over and over and over again. And so he's not getting any relief at all. I mean, impeachment 1, impeachment 2, this civil case, which is about his properties. They claim that he inflated the value of his properties, right, in order to get bigger loans or something. Right. And then, of course, the raid. I mean, I just think he's starting to feel like, wow, they're really just going to, it's never going to end. And so maybe there's fear there. Yeah, you're right. He's normally like pretty bombastic.
It seems, I guess. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've never seen him act like this. But he was not afraid, of course, to talk about the Fifth Amendment many, many times. Now, this is how, if you saw today, because we like to show you every side of the story here on this show. And today there was a number of liberal like TikTok accounts and Twitter accounts that, of course, were in heaven, flipping out and super happy about this, right? Michael Rappaport, the actor, who hates Trump, he tweeted out this compilation.
If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth so they're not prosecuted, when you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful.
Have you seen what's going on in front of Congress? Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Horrible. Horrible.
Now, I find this to be a little bit ignorant because if you are facing a criminal investigation, which it does now seem that the president is, based on this FBI raid on his house, his lawyers would absolutely want to avoid a deposition because a deposition would be usable in the federal case and he could absolutely implicate himself. So no matter what you think of President Trump, no lawyer after a federal raid would say, oh, okay, well, now tomorrow's the deposition on another case. You know, you're rested up for that. Do you have your lunch packed? Absolutely. That it just wouldn't happen, period.
Right. And Kim, with your legal background, were you a lawyer? Or
I don't have no, I just happen to be married to one. But
oh, okay. So you know a lot about the law, but is that the case? I mean, on the deposition side, like you give a deposition over here, now they can use it anywhere they want, right?
That's actually a really good question. I could just, I could ask my lawyer here in the chat.
I'm fairly certain that it would be usable, and especially that any government agency could at least apply to have those things. Like there's a strong chance that he would implicate himself. Anything, really.
And I just wanted to say, Kim, because I know there's a lot of ignorance when people just jump on social media about the legal process, right? I mean, this was something you addressed recently with the Alex Jones trial, right? And so there's a lot of ignorance. People just jump on things and think one way, but they don't understand the intricacies of how a particular trial might play out, or how a default judgment might play out, or how a deposition might play out, right?
Right. Yeah. My husband, by the way, just said yes. I asked him, can a deposition in one case be used against you in another case? He says, yes, I do it all the time. He says if someone is claiming something, basically then, yeah, so he kind of gives me an example. But yeah, he says you can take anything they say in court, I suppose, and use it against them.
So then, I mean, no matter how anyone wants to dunk on this on Twitter, oh, you're taking the fifth, you said you'd never do it. This is an extreme case in which pretty much every lawyer representing Donald Trump in this instance would say, you must take the fifth, no matter, even if he was willing to do this, which makes me wonder if Attorney General Letitia Jones is furious because she was just 24 hours, 48 hours away from deposing the president when the FBI got into his house and spooked him off. She very well could have otherwise got her deposition. She may be fuming and saying, couldn't you guys wait 48 hours, 72 hours?
Well, that's a great question. So we were kind of chatting about it before the show, and let's open it up to our audience too. And let's ask everyone in the chat. This is a really interesting point, right? If you're Letitia Jones, you're the Attorney General, you know you're meeting with the president this week in this deposition. You're going to be talking with him finally. Do you think that she's pissed? First of all, do you think that Trump would have actually talked and not pleaded the fifth had the FBI not raided his house? Like, he would have gone in there and actually talked? Like, did this throw a wrench in the works? I'm just curious what people think about that. Kim, what do you think? Do you think that he would have talked if not for this Mar-a-Lago raid?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Wow.
he's not shy for work. I think he would have said so. Yeah, I think because this was a civil case about, as we mentioned, supposedly or allegedly fraudulently inflating the value of his properties. And so I think he would have maybe said something about that. But yeah, when you're facing a criminal case and the US government is coming after you, I don't think anybody should be saying anything. If the government's coming after you, you probably, no matter who you are, whether you be the former president of the United States or just me, you probably are better off pleading the fifth. I mean, they're going to use everything they can to get you. And I think it's really obvious to him now, especially with this raid on Mar-a-Lago, and they're claiming that it's for the presidential, what is it? What's the act?
Records
the act
Act
against,
of 1978. Yeah.
Right. So they're claiming that he may, which the president has the right at any time to declassify anything the president wants. There is a process you have to go through in order to do that. So this is maybe a criminal case about procedure. So saying, well, you didn't properly declassify these documents, unless there's more to it than that, it once again reeks of political witch hunting, just something that others have done and it gets overlooked. And then when he does it, it doesn't get overlooked. So when he sees now that they're just going to come after him for anything, and, you know, I have no doubt that he's done some things wrong. I have no doubt that any of these wealthy people who've been, you know, I mean, Trump's been in business forever and ever and ever. He's been doing things for a really long time, and they're just now going after him, you know, when he's no longer in their political favor. I mean, they had years to go after him when he was just a rich person in Manhattan conducting business. They could have done it at any time.
Yes.
So it smells of this, and I think he knows that. And so it is in his best interest to just not say a word, which is very unlike him, right? He likes to talk.
Right.
But I think maybe if it hadn't been for this.
I'm sure
he is saying words through his campaign now, or what looks like a campaign, because in overnight after the raid, after the news of the raid was Tuesday, that this whole week is just like Monday's the raid, Tuesday's the news, Wednesday's the like that's my whole week, right? Tuesday night he launched what looks to be a campaign ad. We're gonna play you just the first few seconds of it. I think it does strike the tone of like, now this is serious, you guys, and you know he's kind of ready to speak for himself. Listen.
We are a nation in decline. We are a failing nation.
Yeah, no, this is the ad. Like, you can keep playing it. It's just rain. Like,
this is it.
Yeah, this is it.
We are a nation that has the highest inflation in over 40 years. Where the stock market just finished the worst first half of a year in more than
It's like a
5
thunderstorm.
decades.
Wow.
He says this is a nation in decline.
That has the highest energy cost in its history, and we are no longer energy independent or energy dominant, which we were just 2 short years ago.
And it just goes on. But as a result of that, by the way, he had the most campaign contributions, or a record overnight with the number of campaign contributions after this raid on Mar-a-Lago. So
because his supporters are furious, they're pissed because he sort of has primed them for this, right? Telling him they are coming after me in a very personal way because of my connection to you, the American people. You know, some political pundits are even saying like this is almost too good to be true for him, because it plays exactly into his narrative. And if he had any waning base before, he definitely won't now. We spoke about yesterday how, you know, pretty much the GOP is united in their defense against him now. The GOP, which, you know, kind of sighed collectively when he left office because they were put in so many corners about supporting him on some things and not others. Mitch McConnell was not one of them. He seemed to always come for Donald Trump whenever Donald Trump called him, like a Theon Greyjoy. And but he now has come out and said the country deserves a thorough and immediate explanation of what led to the events on Monday. He said Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice should have already provided answers to the American people and must do so immediately. And I agree with him for how divisive and how emotional this is for so many people. It would be nice to have some kind of explanation of why this is. Otherwise, the conclusion continues to be drawn, witch hunt, right?
Yeah, and so... And I'd love to get Kim's thoughts on these. By the way, Kim Iverson joining us from the Kim Iverson Show. Not a lawyer, but married to a lawyer. I thought because she speaks so highly, such intelligence on legal issues on your show. I thought, wow, she must be a legal background here. But I want to get some raid updates here, because if we're waiting on the government to tell us, like we're waiting on the government to give us like updates on what happened, what are they looking for, what is the cause of this. Mitch McConnell's absolutely right. So we have some updates now. We're learning more details about the raid on Florida. We're learning that the FBI searched Melania Trump's wardrobe, spent a long time going through her clothing.
I mean, I would too, though. She's got a lot of fabulous things.
Like,
I'd be right there with you.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what you think of them, I was always just so fascinated by her wardrobe.
Yeah, she looks great all the time. So
yeah.
Well, maybe they were looking for
some of those bags.
Maybe they were looking for stuff hidden in the bags or behind clothing or whatever. They went through every room. It's a sprawling estate. The New York Post learned that the search warrant issued by the FBI to enter the focus solely on the presidential records and the evidence of classified information being stored there. So, okay, then you're going through her clothing. Okay, that's interesting. A source also was concerned that the FBI and DOJ lawyers conducting the search could have planted stuff. Okay, this is a big story that's been unfolding today, is that Donald Trump they're worried that the FBI or that the DOJ in the House maybe planted stuff. The New York Times is saying that this is baseless. This is the New York Times headline on this. They said this is totally baseless. Trump is baselessly suggesting the FBI might have planted evidence during its search. But of course, conspiracies are going to run rampant because there are reports today that inside the house, the agents asked the groundskeepers or whomever to turn off the security cameras while they conducted their raid. So we know you have security cameras all over Trump's house. Please turn them off while we conduct our raid. And the Trump team said, no, we're not going to. So that's interesting.
I would think, this is conjecture, that you would need a warrant for that piece of it too.
I don't know.
Right. I would think so too. I wouldn't do it. I'd be like, no. In fact, I'm going to whip out my cell phone and start recording you guys while we're at it. I'm going live.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Right.
Exactly.
Of course, they would have to have a court order to get you to turn off those cameras.
So I guess where you could see the concern about stuff being planted, right? You could make that mental leap then if you're the president and you're hearing that they asked you to turn off all the cameras so they could spend hours in your personal office and do other things.
And again, it goes back to that feeling of desperation. It kind of goes back to that Ukraine-Russia conflict of who did what, who done it. And you just have to look at who's more desperate. And we've seen that the establishment, and as you point out, on both sides, not just the Democratic establishment, but the Republican establishment as well, they do not want Trump back. They hate him. They don't want him to come back. They don't like what he stands for. And they're desperate because he's only rising in popularity. Everything they have done to try to get people to turn on him, from the first impeachment, second impeachment, to everything they've tried, he's only gained in popularity, and his war chest for campaigning has just grown exponentially. And so it just goes to show how stupid. For one, when we hear this story and it's like now he's got record donations coming to him, and I think that's not just from his supporters, but probably a lot of independents as well, who are disgusted by what they saw, because the raid on Mar-a-Lago could very well turn out, depending on what, we still are waiting for the information of what exactly they're looking for. But if it really does just boil down to, we think he took classified information without going through the process of declassifying it properly, or somebody on his team didn't properly go through that process, or whatever. If it comes down to technicalities, this is going to be viewed on the Republican side as like their January 6th. The U.S. president, the former U.S. president, was raided. His house was raided. That's like the stuff you hear about going on in Brazil, not here in the United States. That's banana republic level stuff. So people are looking at this in shock and horror, thinking you're going to really go after political opponents like this.
I think you're absolutely right about that. It was one thing for Democrats to use the IRS. What was it, the Cincinnati office, to go after Republican political opponents, right? They used the IRS office out of Cincinnati. I believe it was Southern Ohio, right? And there was a whole backlash about that. But that was small compared to this, like weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after your political opponents at the presidential level. I mean, because who else do they have to run against them right now, right? Like, and from a third party candidates, this is your guy. If you're sort of in the middle, you're independent. I think you bring up a great point. You might say, well, I don't see anybody else coming forward that I'm going to support against this. What's happening right now in the United States? This is not the country that I support anymore. Yeah. And here's somebody that's saying they're going to completely drain the swamp, and they're seeing what's happening to them. I think you're absolutely right about that.
And a thought that goes through my mind constantly is, when my ballot comes, when it's time to make the vote, at this point, if it were Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, my thought is Trump would have withdrawn from NATO by now. This war wouldn't be quite so bloody. It wouldn't be so drawn out. Am I then, if I voted for Trump, would I be voting for this war to end earlier? And that would weigh heavily on my decision.
But then you have to think about the deep state and how massive the military industrial complex is.
Sure.
They talked him out, of course, actual withdrawal of Afghanistan in the way that he wanted to and other stuff. So, I mean, the deep state is strong. The military entrenched industrial complex that, they know you're there for 4 years and you're gone. But that deep state stays.
But look at it this way now. Trump now knows that. I mean, the first term, he claimed it getting into office. I think he somewhat believed it. Maybe it was more the team around him kind of telling him, hey, listen, you've got to dismantle all of the corruption, drain the swamp, all of that's going on there. And what we saw was he got in there. He was like green to the whole process and made a lot of bad decisions of people that he allowed to surround him. A lot of these establishment folks that, ended up being moles and leaking stuff to the press and ended up trying to undermine his decisions. And then he had to battle them. And I think he realized, especially on his way out, that, when you've got guys like Mitch McConnell completely throwing, just being like, oh, okay, now we're fully separating from this guy. We don't like him, hoping to separate him from the Republican base unsuccessfully. I think now, if Trump were to go in for a second term, it could go one of two ways, right? Like, he either now learned the establishment is strong and you really do need to go in there and drain the swamp. You got to figure it out, but do what you can to dismantle it. Or he could become like then he would become the worst nightmare that people that were afraid of him were crying out for, saying the guy's going to be this crazy dictator. I mean, it could, he could just use it and say, that's it. Like, I'm just going scorched earth on this place.
I mean, I would love to see that happen, because, the first time he didn't drain the swamp, right? That's a huge criticism. I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to drain the swamp. And he didn't. I mean, you might be a huge Trump supporter and you might think that he did. He did not. Like, the facts are in on that. He did not do that. So would he do it this time? I think you're right. Like, he had a lot of yes men around him telling him, look, Donald, you need to curry favor with the Washington elite. You need to, do these things right, do things right. And maybe you're right. This time, if he got in, he would actually say, nope, I'm done. I've learned my lesson. All of you guys are fired. I mean, might be an empty Washington, D.C.
And that's the only way he could do it. That's what he'd have to do, because what he learned the first time around is you can't trust any of them. I mean, they sat there and they said, oh, no, I'm here to drain the swamp with you. Hire me. I'm here to do that. Put me in this position. And it didn't happen. Instead, they turned on him and he saw the reality of the establishment, of the machine, of the deep state, or whatever you want to call it. And maybe this time around he would say, and this ad kind of gives that tone, right? This ad that he's released, it kind of gives that tone of like, okay, we're serious, as you mentioned. Yeah. Let's do this.
Right. It's like, look, we're in a dire time. It's time to come out with everything we've got. And, the tone, it hits, it feels that way. Yeah.
The thunderstorm.
And that's not something, again, I thought that I would ever say, but